In the mid-1980s, as the gaming world was experiencing a revolution, Konami unleashed a game that would not only define a genre, but also cement itself as one of the most iconic franchises in video game history, Castlevania. Released on the Famicom Disk System in Japan in 1986, and later on the Nintendo Entertainment System in North America in 1987, Castlevania wasn't just another side-scrolling action game. It was a gothic odyssey that set the stage for what would become one of the most beloved series in gaming. At its core, Castlevania took inspiration from the universal horror films of the 1930s and 40s, blending the eerie atmosphere of Dracula's castle with a relentless difficulty that would challenge even the most seasoned players. Developed by a relatively small team at Konami, the game was a product of its time, a time when developers were pushing the limits of 8-bit technology to create experiences that felt larger than life. Castlevania was released during a pivotal moment in the industry when the NES was gaining traction in households around the globe, and it played a crucial role in showcasing the console's potential to deliver complex and immersive gameplay. What set Castlevania apart from its contemporaries was not just its setting, but its meticulous design. Players took on the role of Simon Belmont, a vampire hunter armed with a legendary whip, as they embarked on a treacherous journey to defeat Dracula himself. The game's gothic aesthetic, combined with its haunting soundtrack, created an atmosphere unlike anything players had experienced before. From the moment you hit start and heard that iconic vampire killer theme, you knew you were in for something special. Castlevania wasn't just a game, it was the beginning of a legacy. It set the foundation for what would become a long-running series, spawning numerous sequels, spin-offs, and even a Netflix adaptation. But it all started here, with a simple 8-bit game that dared to be different. In an era dominated by bright and colorful platformers, Castlevania embraced the dark and the macabre, creating a niche that would only grow in popularity over the years. This introduction to Castlevania serves as a reminder of how one game can change the landscape of an entire industry. By blending innovative gameplay with a distinctive style, Castlevania didn't just carve out a place for itself in gaming history, it built a castle there. Before we move on, hit that subscribe button and stay up to date on more deep dives into retro gaming. At the heart of Castlevania lies a tale as old as time, a battle between good and evil, light and darkness. The story begins in the year 1691, set in the mysterious and foreboding land of Transylvania, where an ancient evil has risen once more. Dracula, the Lord of Vampires, has emerged from his slumber to spread darkness across the land, threatening to plunge the world into eternal night. His resurrection is a curse upon the land, bringing with it legions of monsters and horrors that stalk the night. Enter Simon Belmont, a member of the legendary Belmont family, known for their lineage of vampire hunters. Armed with the Vampire Killer, a sacred whip passed down through generations, Simon is the only hope to stop Dracula's reign of terror. The Belmonts have a storied history, one intertwined with the very existence of Dracula himself, as they have been locked in a seemingly endless struggle with the Dark Lord for centuries. The story of Castlevania is simple, yet effective, drawing on classic gothic horror motifs that were popular in literature and film. It doesn't rely on lengthy cutscenes or complex dialogue, but instead uses its atmospheric setting and visual storytelling to convey the narrative. From the moment Simon steps foot into Dracula's castle, the player is immersed in a world steeped in dread and danger. In Castlevania, the story is not just about one man's battle against evil, but about the eternal struggle between light and darkness, embodied in the timeless conflict between the Belmonts and Dracula. It's a tale that resonates not just because of its simplicity, but because of the rich atmosphere and tension that permeates every moment of the game. And it is this story that has helped Castlevania endure as one of the most iconic and beloved games of all time. At its core, Castlevania is a side-scrolling action platformer, but it's far more than just a straightforward run and jump adventure. The gameplay of Castlevania is where its true genius lies, blending tight controls with challenging level design to create a test of skill, patience, and strategy that has stood the test of time. You take control of Simon Belmont, a character with a deliberate, somewhat rigid movement style that mirrors the weight of his mission. Unlike some other platformers of its era, where characters zipped across the screen with ease, Castlevania requires you to think carefully about each move. Simon's jumps are committed, you can't change direction mid-air, so every leap must be planned with precision. This might seem restrictive, but it adds to the tension and the methodical pace that makes Castlevania so unique. Simon's primary weapon is the Vampire Killer, a whip that can be upgraded in both power and range as you collect power-ups scattered throughout the levels. The whip is your main line of defense against the hordes of supernatural enemies that fill Dracula's castle, and its importance cannot be overstated. The timing and rhythm of using the whip are crucial. You need to master its range and speed to effectively dispatch enemies before they overwhelm you. In addition to the whip, Simon can collect various sub-weapons, which add a strategic layer to the gameplay. These include the throwing dagger, the boomerang-like cross, the holy water, the axe, and the stopwatch that temporarily freezes enemies. Each sub-weapon consumes hearts, which are collected throughout the game, so managing these resources becomes key. Knowing when to use a sub-weapon and which one to pick up for each situation adds depth to the otherwise straightforward combat mechanics. The game is notoriously tough, with no continues and limited lives, meaning that each mistake can be costly. However, this difficulty is part of what makes the game so rewarding. Castlevania is a game that demands your full attention. It's not something you can breeze through. Every victory feels earned, and the challenge is balanced by the game's fair design. There are no cheap tricks, only obstacles that require skill to overcome. Each element of Castlevania's gameplay, from its deliberate controls to its challenging level design and atmospheric presentation, comes together to create an experience that's as much about mastering the game's systems as it is about surviving its horrors. The gameplay is the beating heart of Castlevania, ensuring that every step you take, every whip you crack, and every monster you defeat feels like a significant achievement. In many ways, Castlevania set the standard for what a great action platformer should be, influencing countless games that followed. Its gameplay, while tough, is meticulously crafted to provide a sense of accomplishment that few games can match. And even decades later, it remains a benchmark for challenging, skill-based gameplay. The graphics and sound of Castlevania are integral to its identity, creating an immersive experience that draws players into its dark, brooding world. For a game released in the mid-1980s, Castlevania pushed the limits of the NES hardware, crafting a visual and auditory landscape that perfectly complemented its gameplay and story. Starting with the graphics, Castlevania utilizes the NES's limited color palette to its advantage, creating a moody, gothic aesthetic that has become a hallmark of the series. The game's setting, Dracula's sprawling labyrinthine castle, is depicted with a remarkable level of detail, considering the hardware constraints of the time. Each of the castle's 6 stages has its own distinct visual identity, from the eerie, moonlit entrance gates to the dank, dungeon-like corridors and the towering mechanical gears of the clock tower. This variety keeps the game visually engaging, as you're constantly exploring new and different environments within the castle. The sprite work in Castlevania is particularly noteworthy. Simon Belmont, the game's protagonist, is rendered with a strong, heroic appearance, his movements animated in a way that feels deliberate and weighty. The enemies, too, are given a lot of attention. From the shambling zombies to the ghostly knights, each creature is designed to be instantly recognizable and to convey the sense of dread and danger that permeates the castle. The bosses are especially well crafted, with larger, more detailed sprites that make them feel like true threats. Whether it's the towering Frankenstein's monster or the ominous Grim Reaper, these bosses are not only challenging in gameplay terms, but visually impressive as well. The color schemes throughout the game are carefully chosen to reinforce the atmosphere. Dark blues, grays, and purples dominate the backgrounds, giving the game a cold, oppressive feel that's perfectly suited to its horror themes. Even the more vibrant elements, like the red curtains in Dracula's final chamber, are used sparingly and to great effect, highlighting key areas and adding to the overall sense of foreboding. But it's not just the visuals that create the atmosphere. Castlevania's sound design plays an equally important role. The game's soundtrack, composed by Kinuyo Yamashita and Satoe Terashima, is legendary. The music of Castlevania is instantly recognizable, with tracks that have become iconic not just within the series, but in video game history as a whole. The opening stage theme, Vampire Killer, is one of the most famous pieces of video game music ever composed. Its driving beat and haunting melody setting the tone for the entire game. Each stage has its own theme, from the frantic wicked child to the ominous heart of fire. And these tracks do more than just fill the background, they actively enhance the player's experience, making every moment feel intense and dramatic. In an era when many games featured bright, cheerful visuals and catchy, upbeat tunes, Castlevania dared to be different. Its dark, gothic aesthetic and haunting soundtrack were a breath of fresh air, offering players a more mature and atmospheric experience. The graphics and sound of Castlevania work together to create a cohesive world that feels alive, if not undead, enhancing every jump, every attack, and every encounter with a sense of weight and consequence. Even today, the visual and auditory elements of Castlevania hold up remarkably well. The game's distinctive style has influenced countless titles that followed, and its music continues to be celebrated in concert performances and remixes. Castlevania's graphics and sound are more than just a product of their time. They are timeless, contributing to the game's lasting appeal and its place in the pantheon of video game classics. Castlevania is more than just a game. It's a cornerstone of video game history, a title whose influence can be seen across generations of games and genres. The legacy of Castlevania begins with its immediate impact on the action platformer genre. In an era dominated by bright, colorful games with straightforward mechanics, Castlevania introduced a darker, more atmospheric experience that emphasized methodical gameplay and challenging skill-based mechanics. Its combination of precise platforming, strategic combat, and horror-themed aesthetics was groundbreaking, setting a new standard for what action games could achieve. The success of Castlevania on the NES laid the groundwork for a franchise that would continue to evolve over the years. It wasn't just a one-off hit, it was the beginning of a series that would explore new ideas and push the boundaries of what was possible in video games. Perhaps the most significant evolution of the Castlevania series came with the release of Castlevania, Symphony of the Night in 1997. This title not only redefined the franchise, but also helped establish the Metroidvania genre, a term now used to describe games that blend platforming, exploration, and RPG elements in a non-linear world. Symphony of the Night expanded on the series' traditional formula by introducing a vast interconnected map, character progression, and a greater emphasis on exploration. It was a revolutionary game that influenced countless other titles, from indie hits like Hollow Knight to major franchises like Dark Souls. Beyond its influence on game design, Castlevania has had a profound cultural impact. The series' gothic horror themes and aesthetic have inspired everything from movies to music. The blend of classic horror monsters, atmospheric settings, and dramatic orchestral music created a unique identity for the series that continues to resonate with fans around the world. The franchise's music, in particular, has achieved legendary status, with compositions from the series being performed in concerts and reimagined in countless remixes. In addition to its influence on game development, Castlevania has also made its mark in other media. The 2017 Netflix animated series Castlevania brought the franchise to a whole new audience, blending the series' rich lore with a modern, mature narrative style. The show was critically acclaimed, praised for its writing, animation, and faithfulness to the source material. It not only revitalized interest in the franchise, but also demonstrated the potential for video game adaptations to be successful in other forms of entertainment. The legacy of Castlevania is one of innovation, influence, and enduring popularity. It's a series that has not only withstood the test of time, but has also shaped the very fabric of the gaming industry, from its humble beginnings on the NES to its status as a cultural icon. Castlevania remains a testament to the power of great game design and storytelling. The series has inspired generations of gamers and developers alike, and its impact will be felt for years to come. In the end, Castlevania is more than just a game, it's a legend. A legend that continues to haunt the halls of gaming history, just as Dracula's castle haunts the nightmares of those brave enough to enter its gates. Thank you for joining us. If you like this deep dive into the retro world of Castlevania, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Until next time, keep questing and keep gaming.